The Supreme Court, they're killing it. They're killing
it is like society.
They're killing someone. The Supreme Court is now allowing cities to enforce bans on homeless people sleeping. It says sleeping outside or in public property, but they're clearly not going to sleep in private property because that'd be breaking and entering. So if you've eliminated public property and private property, where the fuck do you think they're sleeping?
Also, to point that out, when somebody does allow unhoused to sleep in their homes, such as we've seen this like over the winter, we saw over the past few years, I've seen a few cases like this, then the person is taken to court by that city or that state for operating like an illegal hotel, basically. So
in Chicago, a guy was arrested.
Even if you do invite someone into your home to try to keep them, I don't know, from freezing to death, you can be attacked by the state. So not only are you do not have access to private property, like if you wanted to squat or something like that, but even if somebody invites you in, like we can't even give them the same rules that we give to vampires. They can't even be invited in to a space.
We don't give them the same love we give vampires.
Seriously.
That's a good line. And so to get down beneath the surface level of how terrible this decision is, and it clearly is terrible and horrific, but this is the ruling elite, very, very wealthy people. Even if not everybody who on the Supreme Court is a millionaire, I'm sure they're close, enacting laws that were decided on by other very wealthy people even before them. And those people are basically like, how can we treat the poorest people in the nation more like shit? And then you get decisions like this. But below that, you have the fact that this has to do with capitalism. This is how capitalism works. A certain percentage of people are going to be churned up and shat out by this system. And not all of them are homeless. Many people have their lives destroyed in other ways by this capitalist system. And luckily, they still have a home or a place to sleep. But many of them also are homeless. It amazes me that they can even come up with new and worse ways to treat people who are at the bottom of the harm that this system does to human beings.
The precedent or the argument was that this was a threat to health and public safety. My question, of course, is who is the public? And this goes again. I wrote an article.
Homeless people don't count as humans. Yeah. They're not public.
And I wrote an article about this for Truth Out, about the systemic dehumanization of the unhoused so that you aren't considered part of the public. Clearly, because you're not allowed to sleep. You're not allowed to try and shelter, right? This decision will have very violent ramifications. And I'd like to point out that even before this decision came down, it's not like you could be unhoused and not be harassed by cops. I've seen homeless sweeps literally across the nation from LA to DC, and they are always violent. They are always in the name of public health and safety, and they are always really for the sake of either gentrification or to clean up the way that the city presents itself every year, like before the Grammys or the Oscars, where those events are held. Yeah. They do massive sweeps. And so a lot of folks who have been unhoused for a while know not to be there, but people who are newly unhoused and things like that, who think that they'll go to these places because they'll potentially get more money from tourists or things like that, they get violently accosted by cops for the sake of some douche canoe in a $5,000 dress getting a little toy soldier for crying on screen or whatever. Yeah. And this is, I mean, you see this with the Olympics too, right? Like people who are not part of this gleaming image of what the Olympics are supposed to be, this luxurious homoerotic festivity, have to be pushed aside.
Homoerotic.
They were originally naked Greeks going at it. I'm sorry. But
because
it has very homoerotic
because I have no problem with homosexuality. I think it should be more homophobic. Not homophobic, more homoerotic. I'd say we should increase the homoeroticism, right? Put them all in thongs.
Sure.
What's wrong with homoeroticism?
Nothing.
Why do you have an issue with that?
Nothing from my perspective.
Uh-huh.
But from the perspective of those putting on the Olympics.
But yeah, no, the Olympics, World Cup, any of these big events, they just destroy homeless. They just could go after the homeless people to make more room. A lot of this has to do with the system, and it has to do with mental health is a major thing. Estimates are that at least 50% of those who are chronically homeless have severe mental health issues. That kind of brings us to our next story, which I'm sure is being touted in, especially on the Fox Newses of the world. A man tried to drown a woman and he attacked 2 others. As you can barely see, there's not much of an image of him, but he does not look like somebody who's really got his world together very well. I would imagine that this person has multiple mental health issues. The right wing will be using this to say, look, in left-wing California, they just let homeless people run amok. But really, the what you should learn from this is that we need better mental health in this system that churns people up and destroys their lives.
Well, and also in this specific case, it seemed that he had been in and out of prison. So maybe we should make prison an actual place
that rejuvenates or
rehabilitates. We should make it a spa.
It rejuvenates too, but rehabilitates. Yeah.
Well, right, and actually, I shouldn't say we should make prison anything. We should abolish prison. Those who really, really need to be removed from society, like Mike Pompeo, who shouldn't be among other human beings because he's a danger to society. Those true like sociopaths and psychopaths that need to be removed, you have a place to put them. That's not a torture chamber. You know, they can graze on grass or whatever the hell. And they can like live without being tortured, but not with society because that's not good for society. So the small amount of people that actually need to be away from society, you have that. Right. But for everybody else, you have rehabilitation because people, for the most part, are not born into being these really, really violent and sadistic people. It is the system that makes them so. And I will say, as somebody who has lived in LA, who has been unhoused in LA, the amount of people unhoused in LA was staggering when I lived there, and it's even more staggering now. And there are so few resources for people. And those are people who have the ability to actually interact with people on a regular basis, who also might be able to have access to, you know, Wi-Fi and things like that. When I moved there, there were still some like paper things and stuff like that. I'm assuming it's all digitized now. So you have to have that digital knowledge. There are so many barriers to access. And so there are a lot of like private NGOs and things like that, nonprofits that try to help people, but they can't possibly do the job of, oh, I don't know, an actual city that doesn't care about the unhoused. This kind of thing will only happen more, particularly when you criminalize it. And somebody was mentioning cruel and unusual punishment. Yes, it is. And actually, Sotomayor said in her dissent that this is cruel and unusual punishment because you're criminalizing sleeping, which is a necessary biological function. Yet the court obviously she did not win in her argument. It is the criminalizing sleeping. It is criminalizing the existence of people who cannot win at the game of capitalism, which, newsflash, is most of us. It's just that a lot of us do have the privilege of housing, but that is a privilege that can so easily be wrenched from you for a number of reasons. Be they, you know, you get cancer and you can't pay for it, be it, you know, you lose your job, whatever.
And speaking of the reasons that people can end up homeless, one of them is not a good support group, support circle. So it's like someone could have, let's say there's 2 people with the exact same circumstances in the United States. One of them happens to have 5 family members that really care about him or her. The other one doesn't have family members or doesn't have family members that have money or a place for them to stay. One of those people, yeah, they've lost their job and whatever else, lost their life savings and have nothing, but they have people to stay with. They have a couch to stay on. They have people that can help loan them money to get them back on their feet, etc. Whereas the other person, it just happens by no decision of their own, happens to not have family to support them. That person is living on a bench, and now living on that bench is illegal. It's like those type of things that are just luck of the draw. They're pivotal in whether someone ends up chronically homeless. And of course, it's a spiraling a problem where, let's say you lose your job, so you have zero money, then you're in your car, then your car breaks down, then you're on the street without a car. Now you're on the street without a car. Well, shit happens when you're on the street without a car. And cops, of course, are regularly going after anyone who's just kind of walking around. So these things spiral out of control where it's one stacked on top of another, stacked on top of another. Of course, drug addiction can be another thing. It's just like a lot of that is not the person's decision. It's not the person's choice. I've had a friend who has had mental illness at times where he would have absolutely been homeless, and he had at times, but he would have absolutely been homeless if there wasn't a big group of people that were all trying really hard to make sure he landed back on his feet. That's just luck. Some people have those friends and some people don't.
Yeah, and somebody pointed out that it spirals as well. Like somebody pointed out, when you have no address, it's extremely hard to get a job. Like, so even if you are trying to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, as they say, what bootstraps where? You don't have access to so many things. And in fact, a lot of shelters have a lot of ridiculous rules. So for instance, the place that this case generates from is Grants Pass. And they only have one shelter for adults, and that requires attending daily Christian services and other rules.
What?
Yeah. This is not unusual because a lot of Christian organizations, because they don't pay any taxes, have run shelters, and then they mandate that you go to services. This is not whoa.
It just happened.
My chair went backwards. This is not unusual. And there are other rules, like some won't let you in unless you pass a drug test. Well, this can be really difficult for people, particularly before marijuana was made legal, and some still won't accept you if you test positive for marijuana. There's a lot of barriers to access, even if you do technically live in a city that has shelters. A lot of shelters won't let couples in because they're not mixed shelters. There's so many.
Dogs is another one. A lot of homeless people have dogs. They can't bring the dogs in.
It's really, really quite grotesque. And with some 600,000 people unhoused in the US every single night, roughly 40% of them sleep outside. So like not even in a car. So whatever 40% of 600,000 is, I don't know. I don't do math. Almost 300,000, almost 50%.
Good enough. Well done.
Those people are now at the mercy of the cops in their area, which is not a good
cops are there to help, though.
Yeah, I'm sure they're just gonna, you know what they're gonna do? They're gonna put a bunch of sleeping bags in all. They're gonna empty the cells of all the people who shouldn't be there because they didn't do anything really wrong, and then they're gonna just put in a bunch of nice bunk beds. That's what they're gonna do.
As they steal the homeless blankets, which they also did in Denver, Colorado, which seems like a place where you might need blankets.
Nah.